I was halfway through a late-night work session when my phone lit up for the third time in 5 minutes. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something about the way it kept buzzing, urgent, almost desperate, made me answer. "Miss Carter?" A male voice, steady but cautious. "Yes, this is Officer Dalton with Brookside Police Department. Are you related to a Margaret Carter?" My pulse stopped cold. "She's my mother." He paused, choosing his next words carefully, like he was afraid I might break if he said them wrong. "We found a woman matching her description outside a Corner Mart gas station about an hour ago. No coat, no shoes, just house slippers. She's bruised and disoriented. She refused the hospital, but she asked for you by name." It had been 7 years since I'd last spoken to her. 7 years since we'd stood in the same room without a fight. And yet, in that moment, every reason I'd left felt small. I grabbed my coat and keys without thinking. No bag, no extra clothes, just the first aid kit from under the sink. Outside, the snow was already layering the streets, frosting over the tire tracks. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I pulled onto the highway. The wipers fought against the storm, smearing more than they cleared. The silence inside the car was deafening. No music, no radio, just my thoughts pounding through me. The last time I'd seen her, we'd argued in her kitchen. I had just gotten a full scholarship to a law program in another state. She said I was abandoning her, said I thought I was better than this family, and then she told me not to come back. But tonight, her voice over that police radio wasn't sharp or accusing. It was small, weak, a voice I didn't recognize. I didn't know what I was driving toward. A broken bone? A concussion? Something worse? All I knew was that my mother had been left out in a blizzard, and the people who were supposed to protect her had walked away. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I was halfway through a late-night work session when my phone lit up for the third time in 5 minutes. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something about the way it kept buzzing, urgent, almost desperate, made me answer. "Miss Carter?" A male voice, steady but cautious. "Yes. This is Officer Dalton with Brookside Police Department. Are you related to a Margaret Carter?" My pulse stopped cold. "She's my mother." He paused, choosing his next words carefully, like he was afraid I might break if he said them wrong. "We found a woman matching her description outside a Corner Mart gas station about an hour ago. No coat, no shoes, just house slippers. She's bruised and disoriented. She refused the hospital, but she asked for you by name." It had been 7 years since I'd last spoken to her. 7 years since we'd stood in the same room without a fight. And yet, in that moment, every reason I'd left felt small. I grabbed my coat and keys without thinking. No bag, no extra clothes, just the first aid kit from under the sink. Outside, the snow was already layering the streets, frosting over the tire tracks. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I pulled onto the highway. The wipers fought against the storm, smearing more than they cleared. The silence inside the car was deafening. No music, no radio, just my thoughts pounding through me. The last time I'd seen her, we'd argued in her kitchen. I had just gotten a full scholarship to a law program in another state. She said I was abandoning her, said I thought I was better than this family. And then she told me not to come back. But tonight, her voice over that police radio wasn't sharp or accusing. It was small, weak, a voice I didn't recognize. I didn't know what I was driving toward. A broken bone? A concussion? Something worse? All I knew was that my mother had been left out in a blizzard, and the people who were supposed to protect her had walked away. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. By the time I pulled into Brookside, it was past 4 in the morning. The storm had thinned, but the wind still sliced through the air like glass. The Corner Mart's parking lot was coated in layers of compacted snow, the yellow lights casting a pale halo over the emptiness. And then I saw her. She was curled between the side of the building and a dented soda machine, like she was trying to disappear into the wall. Her slippers were soaked through, her bare fingers pressed against her arms in a feeble attempt to keep warm. An old robe hung loosely over a stained nightgown, both clinging to her from the damp. I slammed the car into park, nearly sliding into a snowbank. I didn't even close my door as I ran toward her. "Mom," I called, my voice cracking. I hadn't used that word in years. At first, her eyes were vacant, glassy, blinking slow like it took effort. Then, a flicker of recognition and a whisper. "You shouldn't have come. I'm fine, just slipped, that's all." But the bruise forming on her cheek told a different story. It bloomed dark under her pale skin, and when I touched her arm to help her up, she winced, body stiffening as if expecting a blow, not help. A police cruiser idled nearby, exhaust curling into the cold. Officer Dalton stepped out, holding a fleece blanket. "She wouldn't let us touch her," he said quietly. "Said someone named Emily would know what to do." I wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. She resisted for a second, pride, stubbornness, or fear, but then leaned into me, just a little. I guided her to the car, cranked the heat, and turned the vents toward her face. She didn't speak, just sipped at the bottle of water I handed her like it was her first drink in days. Dalton bent down at the window. "She mentioned a son, said he hit her, threw her out. You might want to look into it." My stomach nodded. "Daniel?" I asked. He nodded slowly. I looked at my mother again. She stared straight ahead, lips trembling, eyes wet. Whatever had happened, this wasn't just a fall, and I was about to find out how deep it went. The drive to the only open motel in town was silent. The plows had started making their rounds, but the roads were still slick, the snowbanks piled high on either side. I checked us in with as few words as possible, sliding my ID across the counter. The night clerk didn't ask questions, maybe out of courtesy, maybe because the blanket-wrapped figure shuffling behind me told enough of a story. Inside the room, my mother moved straight to the edge of the bed and sat, still clutching the blanket like armor. The heater rattled against the cold, but she didn't remove it. I brought her a styrofoam cup of hot soup from the vending area. She stared at it for a long time, as if I'd handed her something dangerous. She didn't take a single sip. I crouched down beside her, opening the small first aid kit I'd grabbed from home. Her hands were cracked, the skin split at the knuckles. Her wrist was swollen and tender. "Looks sprained," I murmured, more to myself than to her. She flinched when I wrapped it. "I didn't fall," she said softly, eyes locked on the wall. I waited. I'd learned years ago that silence sometimes coaxed the truth better than questions. Finally, her gaze flicked toward me. "Why did you come?" "Because you didn't deserve to freeze in a parking lot, no matter what's happened." There was a long pause. Then, so faint I almost missed it, she muttered, "Don't let him take it all." My head snapped up. "What?" But her eyes had closed again, her breathing slowing like she hadn't spoken at all. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the second bed, watching the cheap blinds sway with the heater's breath. At some point, her old flip phone buzzed on the nightstand. One voicemail, one bar of battery left. I hesitated, then pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the air, calm, slat, almost bored. "You're embarrassing me, Ma. Keep this up and I'll make sure nobody finds you." It wasn't the threat that chilled me most. It was how casual it sounded. That night, something shifted in me. I'd come here to help her. Now I knew I had to protect her from her own son. By mid-morning, I knew I couldn't sit in that motel room any longer. My mother was still asleep, curled tightly on the far side of the bed, the blanket pulled up to her chin. I told her I'd be back soon and drove across town to Daniel's house, the one I'd once called home. From the outside, nothing had changed. Same beige siding, same crack in the front step Dad always promised to fix but never did. Daniel answered the door slower than I expected, his expression a mix of irritation and forced politeness. I told him I'd come to pick up some of Mom's belongings. He hesitated, then stepped aside. The first thing I noticed was the wall of photographs. Daniel as a toddler, Daniel in his football uniform, Daniel and his wife, Carla, on their wedding day, their daughter in recital costumes and school pictures, all smiles, all perfect. Then my eyes caught an old family photo, the one from Easter Sunday years ago. But something was wrong. The picture had been cropped, neatly and deliberately. My shoulder, my smile, my very presence, gone, as if I'd never stood there. Carla appeared in the hallway, coffee mug in hand, wearing a silk robe. She leaned against the wall like she had all the time in the world. "You swoop back into town after all these years and think you can play the hero?" she said. "You kicked her out in a snowstorm," I replied, my voice even. She smirked. She's been unstable for a while, confused, accusing Daniel of things you and I both know he'd never do. But her eyes flickered at that last part. I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I went to the hallway closet, where I remembered Mom keeping old boxes. After a few minutes of digging past holiday decorations, I found it, a dust-covered box labeled in black marker, 1999, Emily. Inside were pieces of my life, my high school diploma, a torn and taped college acceptance letter, birthday cards, unsigned but marked "proud of you." I didn't take them for nostalgia, I took them for evidence. Whatever Daniel and Carla had done, it was more than neglect, and I was going to prove it. I left Daniel's house with that box in my back seat and a knot in my stomach, but I wasn't done. Something about Carla's tone, smug but defensive, told me there was more buried here. I drove back later, parking down the street. The snow had stopped, leaving the air sharp and clear. Instead of heading to the front, I circled around the side of the house toward the back gate. That's when I saw Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who'd lived next door since before I was born. She was standing on her porch, arms crossed over a heavy cardigan. When she saw me, she beckoned me over. "I saw her that night," she said quietly. "Your mother, she was bleeding." My chest tightened. "Did you see who was with her?" She shook her head. "No, but I heard shouting, and someone slammed the door right after she stumbled outside. I should have called the police, but your mother always told us not to meddle." I thanked her and walked back toward the house. This time, I didn't go inside through the kitchen. I slipped in through the side door that opened into the laundry room. And there, on a small shelf beside the detergent, I noticed something strange, a baby monitor. Not the kind for a child, the kind you'd use to keep tabs on someone. It was dusty, but there was a micro SD card in the slot. I pocketed it and left without a word. Later that night, back at the motel, I bought a cheap card reader from the drugstore. My laptop whirred to life as the files loaded. 10 video clips. The most recent was dated 2 nights ago, the night she was found. The footage was grainy, tilted slightly off-center, but clear enough. My mother stood at the kitchen counter, arguing with Daniel about her bank account. He stepped toward her, no shouting, no wild swing, just a calculated backhand across her cheek. She stumbled into the counter, her head striking the edge before she collapsed to the floor. Seconds later, Carla walked into the frame, phone in hand. She glanced at my mother's crumpled body and kept walking. I didn't watch it twice. I didn't need to. This wasn't hearsay anymore. This was proof. I stared at the frozen frame on my laptop, my mother lying on the tile, one hand curled under her ribs, and felt a cold settle inside me that had nothing to do with the winter air. This wasn't just a bad night. This was a pattern, a lifetime. And now, finally, I had the kind of evidence that couldn't be brushed off as family tension. I uploaded the footage to a secure cloud folder and labeled it simply Mom, 0114 Evidence. No dramatic title, no commentary, just fact. Then I pulled up a blank legal template and started typing: elder abuse, financial coercion, physical assault, dates, names, property transfer receipts, and the voicemail where Daniel threatened to make sure nobody finds her. I had everything I needed to start. I just needed someone who knew the system. Scrolling through my contacts, I found a name I hadn't called in years, Casey Morgan, a nurse I'd once worked alongside who now did social work for the county. She answered on the second ring. "Emily, wow, it's been forever. Is everything okay?" "No," I said plainly, "but I think I finally know what to do." I told her everything, not just about the night my mother ended up outside the gas station, but about the years before it. The bruises explained away, the bank accounts rearranged for her own good, the property deed Daniel had walked away with. Casey didn't interrupt. When I finished, her voice was steady. "I can file for an emergency evaluation. That triggers a home visit, and if it holds up, it goes to court fast." "Do it," I said, "today." She explained the steps I'd need to take: witness statements, medical evaluations, formal petitions for guardianship, and a restraining order. By nightfall, I'd completed more paperwork than I had in months. My hands ached, but my focus was sharp. That evening, my mother finally stirred, her voice raspy. "You're doing all this for someone who never believed you?" "No," I told her. "I'm doing it for someone who deserves to finally believe herself." And for the first time in years, she didn't look away. 3 days later, we walked into the courthouse. The building was old, the kind where the echo of your footsteps seems to follow you like a shadow. My mother walked beside me in one of my jackets, too big for her but warm. She moved slowly, her shoulders pulled back, her face unreadable. Inside the courtroom, Daniel was already there. Dark suit, polished shoes, a tie that looked expensive. Carla sat beside him, perfectly composed, phone in hand. They looked like the picture of respectable family members, exactly the image they wanted the judge to see. When roll call ended, I stood and presented my petition: emergency guardianship, a restraining order against Daniel and Carla, and the evidence I'd brought. I laid out the timeline, the financial transfer of the house, the bank account access, the threats, the video. My voice didn't shake. The judge flipped through the pages, expression neutral. Then it was Daniel's turn. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth, "we're deeply concerned for my mother's well-being, but these accusations, they're the result of long-standing tension in the family. My sister has been distant for years. She's prone to overreaction." Carla chimed in, her voice syrupy. "Emily's always had issues with attention. We've done our best to care for Margaret, but she's been confused, forgetful. We had to make hard choices." I didn't respond. I just waited. Finally, the judge turned to my mother. "Mrs. Carter, do you wish to speak?" The room went quiet. My mother sat still for several long seconds. Then she rose, gripping the edge of the table. "I used to think," she began softly, "that if someone yelled at you, it meant they cared enough to stay. If they hit you, it meant they were still paying attention." She looked directly at Daniel. "I don't believe that anymore." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like glass. When she sat back down, the judge cleared her throat. "We'll reconvene in 72 hours for formal deliberation. For now, Miss Carter will retain temporary guardianship, and the restraining orders are granted." I exhaled slowly. It wasn't over, but for the first time, the tide had turned. The hearing had barely ended before I knew Daniel would try to rewrite the story. 3 days later, the local news announced he'd be holding a press conference to address harmful and unfounded allegations. It was exactly what I expected. Public image had always been his favorite weapon. I watched from the courthouse steps, coat zipped to my chin, phone in hand. On screen, Daniel stood at a podium, dressed in navy with a polished pocket square. Carla hovered just behind him, smiling faintly, her posture angled to look supportive. "Of course, we're heartbroken by these false accusations," he began, his tone patient, almost saintly. "Our family has always prioritized compassion and care for my mother. Unfortunately, my sister has been estranged for years. She's hurt, and sometimes hurt people lash out. It was textbook. Paint himself as the dutiful son, me as the bitter, unstable sibling. The reporters nodded, some scribbling notes. Then, mid-sentence, a ripple passed through the crowd. Several journalists glanced down at their phones. One woman in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Carter," she said, "can you explain this audio clip that just surfaced?" Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry?" She didn't wait. She held her phone up to the mic, and his voice filled the space. Cold, flat, undeniable. "That old woman's a liability. Freeze her out if you have to." A murmur ran through the crowd. Daniel tried to speak, but another reporter cut in. "Is that your voice, sir?" He hesitated. Just long enough. Behind him, Carla's smile faltered. Within minutes, the hashtag #FreezeHerOut was trending online. The clip spread faster than any press statement could control. Advocacy groups reposted it, community pages demanded answers. I hadn't leaked it, but someone else had finally had enough. Back at the motel, my mother watched the broadcast from the bed. When the audio played, she flinched. Not like she was surprised, but like every moment she'd convinced herself it hadn't happened was now playing back in her mind. "He really said that?" she whispered. "Yes," I told her. "And now, so does everyone else." 2 days after the audio went public, I walked up to Daniel's front door without knocking. Legally, I didn't have to. The temporary guardianship gave me authority to retrieve my mother's belongings. But more than that, I wanted him to see I wasn't afraid to stand on his doorstep. The house smelled faintly of citrus cleaner, like someone had tried to scrub away guilt. Daniel appeared in the hallway, already bristling. "You let yourself in?" he snapped. "I didn't come to argue," I said evenly. "I came to end this." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You think a couple of court orders changes anything? You've embarrassed this family enough." "This isn't about embarrassment," I replied. "It's about accountability, something you've dodged your entire life." Carla entered from the kitchen, arms crossed, phone in hand. "Is this supposed to be a performance, Emily? Should we call the cameras?" I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 envelopes. "This is a formal revocation of your power of attorney. And this," I tapped the second, "is the motion for permanent guardianship. Court dates next Thursday. There's also a protective order. You are not to contact or approach Mom again." Daniel's lip curled. "Who do you think you are?" "The person you should have stopped underestimating a long time ago." Before he could respond, soft footsteps creaked on the stairs. His daughter, Lily, stood halfway down, clutching a drawing. "I want to live with Aunt Emily," she said quietly. The room froze. Carla's expression stiffened. "Honey, let's not." "I don't want to stay here," Lily interrupted. "I'm tired." I stayed silent, letting the moment belong to her. Daniel's voice turned sharp. "This is manipulation." "No," I said. "She's turning towards safety." At that moment, 2 uniformed officers stepped through the open door. One addressed Daniel. "Mr. Carter, you're in violation of the protective order by confronting her here. You'll need to leave the premises." Daniel's glare burned, but he didn't resist as they escorted him out. When the door shut, the house felt different. Not safe yet, but lighter, like a window had been cracked open in a long, closed room. In the weeks after Daniel was escorted out, the air around us began to shift. It wasn't some movie moment where everything magically healed. My mother didn't suddenly become the warm, unflawed parent I'd always wanted. But the house felt different, quieter, without the constant tension hiding in the corners. She moved into a small, single-story rental tucked behind an elementary school. Modest, but with enough light in the mornings to make the kitchen feel alive. Lily stayed with us most weekends, filling the space with crayons, notebooks, and questions that made me realize just how much she'd been holding in. My mother started taking her medication regularly, something she'd resisted for years. She asked fewer questions about Daniel, stopped bringing his name into every conversation. We didn't avoid talking about him out of fear, we just didn't need to anymore. Carla disappeared from the public eye. After the press conference fallout and the leaked audio, her name quietly dropped from the real estate firm's website. The charity events she once hosted stopped sending invitations. Daniel didn't face criminal charges. Elder abuse cases rarely stick without an overwhelming burden of proof, but the damage was done. Clients pulled their accounts. His once gilded office door now bore someone else's name. Word spread that he'd moved south, chasing warmer weather and a place where no one knew the phrase "freeze her out." One morning in early March, I found an envelope on the kitchen table. No name on the front, just my mother's handwriting inside. There's no fixing what I ruined. But you showed up. You didn't let me freeze twice. That's more than I deserve. It was only 3 sentences. No apology, no signature. But for her, it was the closest thing to an open door I'd ever been handed. That weekend, Lily and I planted daffodil bulbs in the patchy backyard soil. She poked one with her mitten and frowned. They looked dead. They're not, I told her. They just need time and the right place to come back. She patted the dirt gently, like tucking them in for the season. Maybe that's what we were doing too. By the time spring arrived, the snow had melted into patches of stubborn ice along the sidewalks. Life had slowed to a pace I didn't realize I'd been missing. Most mornings, I'd sit by the kitchen window with coffee, watching the school buses come and go. Some days, I worked on policy briefs for elder care programs, helping nonprofits close the loopholes that people like Daniel slip through. Other days, I just read books I'd abandoned years ago, back when my life was all forward motion and no stillness. Messages began arriving from people I'd never met. Some were short. I saw your story. I was her once. Others were long, pouring out years of unspoken pain. Sons who'd watched their mothers shrink under the weight of manipulative siblings. Daughters who'd fought to pull parents out of toxic homes. A few wrote from assisted living facilities, saying they finally felt seen. I didn't answer them all, but I read every single one. Each one was a reminder. The silence that protects abusers doesn't just harm one person, it echoes across generations. My mother changed too. Not dramatically, not in the way a movie would show it, but in quiet, steady shifts. She stopped defending Daniel. She didn't bring up the past unless I did. And when she looked at Lily, I could see both regret and relief in her eyes. Regret for what had been, relief for what might still be saved. One evening, after dinner, she glanced at the daffodil patch in the backyard. The soil had begun to crack in small places, green tips pushing through. "They came back," she murmured. "They always do," I said, "if you give them enough time." I realized then that I hadn't been looking for a perfect ending. Those don't exist, not in families like ours. What I had now was something different: safety, honesty, and enough peace to breathe without bracing for the next blow. And maybe that's all some of us can hope for, because not all blood is love, and not all silence is peace. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you once trusted completely? Tell me your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it.